Katie, great to see you.
Great to see you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you carving out some time. So, hey, listen, I do want to talk about some key market trends, but before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you and your role at Dell.
Absolutely. So at Dell, I am a complex solution specialist, and all that means is I work with ISG or enterprise grade hardware for small businesses. These are businesses that are really small, from just a couple people up to about 100 people and everything in between.
Okay, excellent. So now I know you are on the phone with partners and small businesses all day talking about the market trends and the opportunities and the solution sets out there. But what do you consider the major trends to be as you're having those conversations?
Absolutely, Joe. So, I mean, they have changed a lot in the last couple of years. I don't think I have to be the one to say anything of that manner, but work looks a lot different now. And that goes for small businesses, that goes for big business, it goes for my everyday work life and probably your own. But we've been moving from offices to houses. We've been moving desktops and laptops and computers from office buildings to home. We hear things about the cloud is out there, and that surrounds us everywhere. That's a big business trend, along with work from home, that kind of hit a lot of small to medium businesses all at once. They pulled us out of the office. They smacked us with this thing called the cloud, and no one really took the time to explain to a lot of us what the cloud is, what it does, what it takes. So that the trends right now, we're seeing work from home, and then we're seeing solutions that make work from home easy for big business, small business, everything in between. That's a lot of what we're seeing right now.
Got it. So, it's interesting when COVID hit and the whole work from home trend hit, obviously small businesses, they and their partners got super busy sort of re-architecting everything just so everyone could work
Everything.
from home, right? But that initial work is done on the one hand, but on the other hand, the work is never done, right? You always want
No.
to optimize and secure and things like that. So could you compare and contrast for me sort of that first wave? Everyone goes home and works from home. How did you help the partners and the small businesses? And now the current reality, what are the modern trends where you're continuing to help those partners?
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. So right when I'll say the pandemic started and everyone went home, the biggest focus was, do I have enough systems? Do I have laptops? Does everybody have what they need to go home right now? Because it was quick. No one really had a lot of warning, at least most of the partners and businesses I talked to. So it was a lot about the things you hold and the things you need to get everyday work done. Then there was an influx of the back end hardware. So everyone went home, and then it was like, oh no, I'm out of storage, or now I need to redo my entire security portfolio because it looks completely different than when the pandemic started. And so you had that flow and that influx. Well, now a couple years down the road, it's kind of all these band-aids that were put immediately when the pandemic started. They're starting to stretch, they're starting to wear, and they're starting to fall off. So that's another trend right now, which I mentioned cloud, and we've got hybrid cloud, lots of things out there. But a lot of that right now is swooping in to fix the band-aids that were made in the mass rush of the change in technology right when the pandemic hit.
Got it. Got it. So so if we go to present day, you and I are talking in mid-July 2022. Are the partners and the small businesses able to go from sort of that stretched world and sort of like the risky band-aid to a hardened, secure, reliable, responsive hybrid cloud architecture at this point? Do you see progress out there?
I do. I really do. And at first, there's a lot of big name cloud providers out there, and it can be very intimidating. And at first, that was a lot for businesses and consultants, anyone to understand, because all you saw were two options. You saw cloud, and then you saw on-prem hardware. Well, now the whole idea of hybrid cloud is what is integrating those band-aids to a more future-proof solution. Because cloud is flexible. When you have private cloud or hybrid cloud or even on-prem, you have some sort of idea of what those mean. You see that they are malleable, they're scalable. You can bend and use them as you need. Whereas these band-aids, they were a quick fix. Well, for a lot of small businesses and partners out there, they can't just go and wipe everything that they just invested in 2 years ago. These solutions are supposed to last years. Well, when you kind of patch those with some sort of hybrid cloud architecture, or even just grow from where you started a couple years ago, you start to integrate what was once your band-aid fix to a more future-proofed solution.
Mm-hmm. And dive a little deeper for me on this future-proof solution, because There was a myth a few years ago that everything would go cloud, right? But
Right.
fast forward to present day, we do see record sales of various infrastructure, whether it's endpoints or network or storage, et cetera. How are you helping the small businesses to understand what is going to become sort of a pure digital off in the cloud versus infrastructure you still need?
Right. No, that's a great point. I'll say the first thing that I really wanted to make sure with everyone I talked to was that everyone had an idea and an understanding of what is the cloud. When you say off-prem or you hear cloud-based or you hear, free for 12 months, what does that really mean? So having an understanding that that is, I call it a rent a data center. You're using hardware in someone else's data center, and maybe that's what your business needs at the time, maybe it's not. But integrating the two of those to the hybrid architecture and explaining that, what is that? What does that mean? Well, genuinely, it really is off-prem and on-prem integration of hardware. So you have on-prem hardware that is yours. You can see it, you can touch it, you can turn it on, turn it off, and then you integrate it with what is cloud. And that, I always look at cloud as either whether you use cloud backup, maybe you use, hosted email in the cloud or something. You have the pitfall with hybrid to keep data secure physically on-prem where you can see it and you can control it. People grew so fast through COVID. Some businesses struggled and we feel for that, but some didn't and some thrived through the pandemic. So they grew faster than they could. So these band-aids, they start to stretch and they start to get out of control. You put a band-aid in your infrastructure, your business, and it works for a little bit. Then you grow. So then you start throwing things on the cloud. You start buying more storage or more networking or more endpoints, and things just start to get really hectic. So understanding how you can integrate the two to make a complete solution, that's where future-proof comes in, is
Mhm.
binding the two together to something that you understand and you can scale as you scale.
Right, right. That's actually a great segue. Sort of that. I love that phrase, "Scale as you scale." And the segue question is, I think about Dell APEX in terms of partners and customers and Dell scaling together on demand. And APEX is sort of the as a service strategy with Dell. Are partners and customers in the SMB asking about that? Yeah, I certainly know your enterprise customers are, but I'm wondering if the SMB understands what's going on here with APEX.
Yeah, and then that's a great point. Is Apex, it's a newer flavoring for Dell in general. This is our platform that we're introducing to the market. And when Apex first came along, the first thing that we were even able to really talk about in the SMB space was backup. Well,
Mhm.
some people would get frustrated and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like I want the full blown Apex portfolio. Trust me, I had colleagues and customers and partners that wanted this whole Apex ordeal. But I was kind of glad it was only backup because that's one thing that has kind of gotten put on the back burner for the last couple of years because you're great backup strategy, but I need this right now. I'm not really worried about my backup right now because my employees need XYZ. So it got put on the back burner for a long time. And now with Apex, especially in my personal bias, Apex backup is very, very consumable for small businesses. It is, in my opinion, it is very entry level friendly at a price point that is fair, at a solution strategy that is fair, that integrates with hardware. So the
Mm.
more people talk about it, I enjoy the conversation. It is coming to the SMB space more and more. It took a little bit longer. You've got big business. It's kind of one of those things that it's more obvious for customers of a very large size, but for smaller businesses, my favorite flavoring is the backup. Of course, we have as a service, but when the conversation comes up about cloud, because it does, and we can't deny it. So the conversation comes up, understanding what it is, and then being able to have Apex and just even using that as kind of a backdoor tool that I can use to even propose what it is or show customers what it can do. It turns a light bulb on, almost a light bulb that's been burnt out for a couple years. We
Mm.
all know that we have to back up. We back up our phones, our laptops, our this, our that. But the influx of technology need over the past couple years has shifted a lot of, I will say, backup. And that's where I use that as a cloud strategy for SMB first, at least.
Okay, so it's interesting. You mentioned backup, right? In every conversation I have with Dell these days, when backup comes up, the security conversation also comes up. What are you hearing there? You tie it all together for me.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a great point that you made there. And honestly, it could probably use its entirely own podcast because there's so much that has to do with backup and security and strategies and recovery. And I'll put it down to this. It's really important to acknowledge, where your data and where your most private data is residing in your business. Where is the information that you can't function without? Where is it? How are you securing it? Do you have a plan if something does happen to it? This can be covered in many ways of hardware, software, cloud backup, anything that I have mentioned. All of these things count and they matter and they help. But what I've seen is that businesses, whether they were deflated or whether they're reviving right now or they're net new, is people are growing beyond what they can secure. So it's very important to know that you have a plan, either that or you're taking precautions, hardware, software, as I mentioned. There are many ways that people can just be aware and acknowledge what they're doing for security. And I sound passionate about it because I am, because small to medium businesses can't really afford a data breach. Most of them can't come back for that. So in these days, when we're coming back to life, we're thriving, we're loud and proud. It's really, really important to make sure that you've got a plan and you have a strategy. And whether that's some hardware you put in your data center, whether it's software you put on your endpoints, many of options, and it's feasible for everybody.
As I mentioned, you and I are talking in mid-July 2022. Not that I need a full, clear picture of what's next, but you give us a preview. How do you see some of these trends unfolding for the rest of 2022? In particular, what it means for Dell's small business customers and the partners that are supporting them?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So right now what we see, and this, like I've mentioned a couple of times, some businesses, we're in 2022 and some are coming back. They're reviving. So we see a lot of partners and businesses coming back and excited. They want new technology. They want latest and greatest. And they want, we just released our brand new line of servers. And so they love that. They want the newest stuff, latest and greatest. Well, for the rest of 2022, that's what kind of that side of the spectrum is going to where they're going to be living. They're going to say, oh, new cloud backup, new cloud as a service. What's best for me? What can I do? Whereas for the rest of 2022, you've got the other side of the spectrum too, trying to grasp and kind of curate and perfect what they have. And that's what a lot of the trends I'm seeing as I see forecasted for the rest of this year are the net new businesses that are coming craving that new technology. And then you've got the other businesses who are trying to perfect the solution that they've been curating over the last couple of years. There's not really there's a ton of in between. There always is going to be, but those are the two largest things I'm seeing every day consistently is somewhere in those two schemes of technology.
Yeah, and it's actually a wonderful time and a wonderful trend that you point out, because you have the existing businesses always seeking to modernize. But then one of the themes you're hitting home on, and it's near and dear to me, is sort of the continued rise of new businesses in the United States, but also worldwide as well. But anyone who talks about it becoming more difficult to start a business, I would argue that it's actually easier to start a business because IT is now consumable for the small business. So you're seeing a continuing influx of startups that your partners are supporting and building out this modern infrastructure?
I am. And just to your point, some would argue that it's easier to start a business. I'm busy all the time and I work with small businesses and partners every single day. And I see it all the time, net new. Either it's new opportunity style type of businesses or it's old businesses that have kind of deflated for a couple years. It is still very current. People are still wanting these solutions. And as you use the word modernize, that is always current right now. I mean, through the pandemic, people, froze. Some people froze, some people didn't know what to do. But that aspect of modernization was kind of lost because people were scattering. What are we going to do? I don't know what to do, XYZ. But now the modernization of technology has really come back into the market, whether you look at APEX, you look at hybrid, you look at the fanciest technology that I could sit here and talk to you about. People are going to be all across that spectrum because to every business, they're going to have a different definition of modernization. And it's understanding what that looks like.
Yeah. And it's funny, you mentioned the sort of people froze during some of the early days of COVID. We only had one rule in my house. I got my wife and I have three sons. And the only rule during COVID was keep moving.
Right.
It's not an
Yes.
excuse to sit back and do nothing. Keep moving. And I think what's wonderful about Dell and its partners is I think that's the rule Dell and the partners had as well for the small businesses. Keep moving. Let's keep America's lights on. Let's keep the global lights on, and
Of
let's keep
course.
innovating through this. So, for those partners who want more information about, all right, maybe I haven't worked with Dell before, maybe I'm not familiar with the latest solution set. Where do they go? How do they get started? Any guidance for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and first I'll say it, no one's alone when it comes to that, because technology, I always say, it changes so fast. To me, when someone's like, "Oh, I know everything," I'm like, "No, you don't." So there's always going to be that side where you crave to know more. And luckily, we do have Kelly.Riggen, and she is a great contact for anyone that's interested in learning more. She is a part of the Dell Expert Network. It's a rewards and incentives program designed for service-focused MSPs who are supporting any of the small to medium businesses in the market. The program's designed to deliver more value and save time for MSPs who are recommending their end users to Dell on any need of hardware, from endpoint to ISG to enterprise grade. There's rewards and plenty of incentives, and Kelly.Riggen is a great contact to really get started in this whole process to join the Dell Expert Network.
Okay. Now, our blog that accompanies this video will have Kelly's email address. But do you have Kelly's email address off the top of your head in case someone's mobile right now and they're not looking at the blog?
I do. It's easy. Kelly, Kelly.Riggen, RIGGEN at Dell.com.
Excellent. Great. And folks, if you reach out to Kelly, that was the Dell Expert Network that you should be asking about. Katy, in the meantime, thank you so much for the overview and some of your thoughts in terms of the key trends out there. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joe.